Okay, we'll start with the Kapitel Tilim. The Rebbe should push the Tilim and the Tzedakah, send the miracles in Israel, that we should have the complete victory of Yidden, and the complete defeat of every single one of the enemies in Israel and around the world. Take a miyad mamish. And everybody should be healthy and well, come home, gesundheit. Lamnat Seyach, Mizmer LeDavid. Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara, Yisagevcha Shem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach Ezrecha mikodesh u'mitzion Yisadeka. Yizker kol min chesecha v'haloscha yidashna sela. Yiten lecha chel vavecha v'chol atzoscha yimalei. Neranu b'shua secha v'shem Eloheinu nidgel. Yimali Adonai kol mishal secha. Ata yodaiti ki Yeshia Adonai Meshicha. Yanehu mishmei kodshay. B'gvurais yesha yeminoi. Ela b'rechev ve'ela b'susim. V'nachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu nazki. Heima korav v'nafolo. V'nachnu kamnu v'naseidu. Adonai Yeshia melech yaneinu v'yem kareinu. So yesterday we learned the Perik or Ois Yudala, the 14th chapter in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, Basar Lagani. And the main point in the Maimer was explaining the words of the Zohar. And Ein Sof is the Mato Adin Tachlis, that comes down infinitely. What does it mean? So we said, number one, that even though the light is Ein Sof, it's infinite. Infinite means it has no form, it has no shape, but it has no description whatsoever. Nevertheless, what comes of it, it gives life and sustenance to everything in the world with all the infinite differences that exist in the realm of Doimim and Tzemeach and Chaya, Medaber, the higher worlds, the lower worlds. It's infinite, different kind of things. And they all get chayes from Hashem's light, which is Ein Sof. In fact, because it's infinite, that's why it could spread out and come all different ways. And on top of that, this Ein Sof also gives life to things that are the opposite of Kedusha. Even Shalosh Klipos HaTmeis, they can't exist without Hashem's life and sustenance. And nevertheless, all these things have absolutely no effect on the light itself. And he explained that in this way it's different than the neshama and the guf. Normally, we draw a parallel between the neshama and the guf, and Hashem and the world. That just like the neshama gives life to the guf, that's how Hashem gives life to the world. And based on this mashal, we learn a lot of things that help us to understand a lot of things and how Hashem gives chayes to the world. But in context of this subject, it's vakar, it's the opposite. That the neshama and the guf, Hashem giving life to the world is not like the neshama and the guf. The neshama and the guf, because the neshama is invested in the guf also has an impact on the neshama. That when something happens to the guf, it has a certain effect on the soul. By Hashem, all the differences and all the things that are going on, even the fact that it's invested in something which is klipa, and the worst kind of klipa, like Mitzrayim, nevertheless, it has absolutely no effect on the earth. It remains pure and soft, just like it was initially. So, of course, this is a deep philosophical concept. It has to do with understanding what the true meaning of Ein Sof is, infinite. How is it that something infinite could manifest in so many millions and billions of infinite kinds of different forms and shapes, if it's infinite. So it's a whole philosophy. What is infinite, and how infinite it is that all these things are happening. But the Rebbe, in this ois that we're going to learn now, again, the mimer of the Rebbe explaining the freedom of his mimer is pages and pages and pages. But I'm just choosing one ois, which is ois Zion, that explains how this idea can also be translated into something practical. First, the Rebbe talks about tzaddikim, and then we'll see how, in a way, we can all apply it to ourselves also. I mean, not Chas v'Shalom implying that people who are not tzaddikim. I mean, those out there who are not tzaddikim. So, here are the sheets. So this is Ois Zion of the Rebbe's Maimer Basilagani Tov Shin Chav Dalet. If you look on top of the page, you'll see that year the Rebbe said 3 Maimerim in honor of Yud Shvat. So this was the third. So that year Yud Shvat came out like this year on Shabbos. And like I said yesterday, the original Yud Shvat, when the Friedrich Rebbe was nostalgic, was also on Shabbos. So when it was on Shabbos, it was a Farbrengen on Shabbos. Then after Shabbos was over, there was a bigger Farbrengen, and that Farbrengen was able to be heard with the microphone, and people came in from other places. That was the bigger Farbrengen. So this mime is from that Farbrengen. Like it says on top of the page, Mitzvah Shabbos Kodesh Parshas B'Shalach. Yesh laHisiv. You can add she'inyan zeh, this inyan, shebatzilus le'shayach shinoi v'spoilus, that in Atzilus there is no change and there's no movement whatsoever. It's totally unaffected by the fact that it extends itself to all these different levels, even the lowest of levels. Matzinu gam b'negela and haga b'pearl. This also manifests in things that are practical. It's known the difference between Yosef and the Shvatim. We'll give a little Hagdama, a little introduction. Introduction is that it says in Chumash that Yosef became the second in command of Paro Mitzrayim. The brothers came down to buy food, and then it says they were communicating with him, but they had no idea that this is Yosef. He recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. And this Maimer, the Rebbe doesn't raise this question, but in other Maimarim, the question is raised, wait a second, we're talking about great tzaddikim. These Shvatim are not ordinary tzaddikim. They're really tzaddikim of one of the highest caliber. They are the source of all the Bnei Yisrael. True, the source of all Bnei Yisrael is Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But then from Yaakov came 12 sons, and they are the heads and the beginning and the source of all the Shvatim amongst Israel. These great tzaddikim look at Joseph, who's also a tzaddik, and they think that he's an Egyptian. How could people like that make a mistake and think that someone like Yosef, who's such a tzaddik, is actually an Egyptian? Remember, the Egyptians were the lowest breed on that generation. Eretz Haaretz. They were the most immoral, impure country in the world, most immoral things going on there. And here's an Egyptian who's on top of the whole place, and they're suspecting that this person that they're looking at is just an Egyptian, and really he's one of the greatest tzaddikim. How could they have made such a mistake? So Chassidus explains that this was because he was so much higher and greater than them, and when it says they didn't recognize him, it means they had no recognition in where he's at. So I want to give a little introduction to understand what was it that they couldn't, in English they say you couldn't wrap their heads around. There was no way it made any sense to them. In Tanya, you find the term Merkava. Anyone know what that term means? Anyone remember it? Chariots. What does a chariot have to do with Tanya?
Has no will, it's all just serves the will.
So what does it mean? When do we use the word chariot? For what?
For tzaddikim.
Right. It's a description of tzaddikim. Not any tzaddik, but tzaddikim of higher caliber. Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Nevi'im, those who have the Ruach HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe says, chariot. So what is a chariot? Let me first explain what a chariot is. Then we'll understand what kind of tzaddikim they were, and then we'll understand what it says in the Maimon. So this is, what I'm going to tell you now, I will do it inside, but I think it'll just take too long, is from a Maimer of the Mittel Rebbe, and he describes what does it mean when we say a tzaddik is a chariot, totally batul to Hashem. So he describes that there's three conditions, three things, like criteria, that this would give someone the title of Merkava. Number one, that their attachment and connection and devotion to Hashem is something which is constant every second without even any single moment of interruption in their life. In other words, normally we think of people, they run. When did you come back? When?
Yesterday night.
At night, yeah. And today, this morning, everybody's okay? Yeah. Okay. So the idea is normally we find a tzaddik davens, and when they daven, they're on fire, and their love to Hashem is like burning to the highest heights. This is a person. A chariot is a person that has this dveikus to Hashem every second of the day without any interruption. But most people feel in certain moments, either when they're davening or Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah, whatever it is, they feel that on a constant basis every second of the day. And using the lashon that it says by Avraham Avinu, that he walked in the direction towards the south, which means he was constantly walking and advancing in serving Hashem. So just like a person that walks every second, he's moving forward. That's how Avraham Avinu every second was moving forward in his avodas Hashem. So it means, think of it this way, that every second, not only was he serving Hashem, not only was he experiencing love and fear of Hashem and all these feelings that most people just feel at special occasions, they feel that every second, it's more than that. Every second, every moment, he moved forward a level higher than the moment before. Normally, we try to do that once a year. I don't know, Shoshana, Yom Kippur. Every moment, like a person who walks, they say a step further, like a person who's climbing a mountain. Every step you take, you're a step higher. That's how Avraham Avinu and all those tzaddikim or Merkava, every step they take is going a step higher. Which means every thought that goes through their mind, every word that comes out of their mouth, every act that they do is godly, is something which is an expression of their dveikus to Hashem. That's number one. Number two is that every moment, could be I put two things together. Number one was that they're dveikus to Hashem every moment without interruption. And number two, not only dveikus, but that they're moving higher every moment. Every moment, they're higher spiritually than they were the moment before. Again, without interruption, on a constant basis. And this means every thought, every speech, and every action, and every nuance. There's nothing that they do that's not an expression of their dveikus to Hashem. Even things that are totally gashmis. Now, that's the third point. That in order to be, remember we told the story yesterday, that in order to get onto the wagon, you have to get off the ground, right? A person can be, the definition of being attached to Hashem and devoted to Hashem and dveikus in Hashem means to be detached from Gashmias. So if every moment they're getting closer to Hashem, every moment they're walking away and sort of disconnecting more from Gashmis and materialist things. They're not into that, which means they're eating and they're drinking and they're wearing clothes and taking care of anything Gashmis that even though all normal human beings do it, they're also doing it, but by them, it has nothing to do with the Gashmis the way we know it. It's all spirituality. They're not connected. And every moment they're going higher and they're moving away from the Gashmis, even though we can't even understand after the first 10 moments where they're going now. But they're moving forward and moving away from the Gashmis, just like when a person walks, person climbs on a mountain. Every step I take, I'm moving forward, but I'm also letting go of the place where I was before. So they're every day and every moment of the day, they're disconnected from Gashmis. And it's not only when we talk about davening and learning, but also Gashmisdika things, and also things which are not even something you would give significance to, but tzaddikim, it's all part of their spirituality. Every tnuah, that's the word you use. Tnuah means every nuance. Now, to give you an example, the Rebbe Rashab once said when he was describing the Alter Rebbe that there's no doubt in my mind that when the Alter Rebbe lifted his right hand to stroke his beard, that at that moment in Shemayim, Chesed of Atzilus ascended to Yud Gimel Tikkun Dikna. Now, those who learn Chassidus, especially in depth, and learn Maimarim on the Parsha, for example, that's what you find all over. Everything Avraham Avinu did, everything Yitzchak did, everything Yaakov did, every movement, every nuance is explained in Chassidus what was going on spiritually. It wasn't the way we see it, the Gashmis. Unfortunately, most people are not familiar with Chassidus. Now, for people that don't know the interpretation, but at least they know the concept. Some people don't even know the concept. So they really look at Yaakov, Avraham, Moshe, other people like, they were spiritual people, but they also had a human part of them, and they were also doing things like other humans. No, these people, everything they did, even the most Gashmi Shebegashmi that they did, was all about something godly that they were involved with. So stroking a beard, the Tzemach Tzedek, also a similar story. Tzemach Tzedek is the one who printed the two fundamental svarim of the Alter Rebbe. One is called Torah Or, the other is called Likutei Torah. And this is a mimer on each parsha of the week. And all the maimarim of all the rabbeim in the future draw from these maimarim. So there's a mimer on every parsha. And just recently we had a Hayom Yom that explained why the two svarim have different names. The first sefer is Chumash Breishis and Chumash Shmos, and the second sefer is Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim, and Shir HaShirim. So if it's one book covering all 5 svarim of Torah, why do they have 2 names? And the answer is because first the Tzemach Tzedek published 2 books, the one on Breishis and the one on Shmos. The intention was to continue, but in those days, the Maskilim, the people of the Enlightened movement, tried to do everything to undermine Yiddishkeit, and especially undermine Chassidus, because they knew that was the strongest force that was fighting them. So they went and used the method, unfortunately, of informing the government and fabricating all sorts of false accusations. As a result of that, they closed down the publishing houses that used to publish Torah books. So for 10 years, they couldn't print the second half. They waited 10 years. 10 years later, it was printed. And for some reason or other, when the second half was printed, Tzemach Tzedek says he's changing the name. So the first half is called Torah Or. The second one is called Likutei Torah. Tzemach Tzedek said that he sat down and went through 2,000 Maimarim that he had from the Alter Rebbe. And from these 2,000, he had to choose which ones should he put into these books that are going to become the fundamental Maimarim of all the future. So he said that when he was a little child, he was sitting on the Alter Rebbe's laps. And as a child, as he was brushing the Alter Rebbe's beard. So the Alter Rebbe said, good, brush it through very good. And he said, and that gave me the strength to brush through the 2,000 Maimarim that I had to brush through.
Wow.
So we're talking about, like I said, the nuance of tzaddikim is much more going on than anything we could imagine. There was once someone that he heard that in a city not far from his city, there's a man living there who used to be a secretary of the Baal Shem Tov, and he figured he probably knows a lot of stories, and he decided he's going to travel there to meet with him and spend time with him and hear stories that he never heard before, to be firsthand from a person who mamish was a secretary. So he traveled to that city. He comes to the house, which he was told this is the house of this secretary. He walks in the house and he sees a person there, an older person sitting on a chair, bent in, moaning and groaning. And there's a younger person who resembles him, so obviously this must be his son. And he's screaming at him, stop moaning, stop groaning, you're just pretending, you're lazy, just get up and do what you have to do. He was shocked. And he said, I'm just coming to visit, I shouldn't say a word, but how does a son talk like that to a father? So he said, excuse me, I'm the father and this is my son. The father looked like he was 40 years old and the son looked like he was 70 years old. So he told him that I'm the one who was the secretary of the Baal Shem Tov. And one time the Baal Shem Tov was sleeping and I was cleaning and sweeping the floor. And the Baal Shem Tov put his slippers down near the bed in a certain spot. So I was about to move them and sweep the floor. Then I said to myself, the Baal Shem Tov put it down here, I'm not going to touch it. I left it there. I swept around it. When the Baal Shem Tov woke up, he said to me, tell me, when you were sweeping the floor, did you move my slippers? I said, no, I didn't. Baal Shem Tov said, thank you so much. Shabbat Bracha, you should live a long life. And since then, he never aged.
Wow.
So he looked like he was 40. His son was actually 70 or something, and he was already not feeling so well. So it was the son who was 90 something screaming at the father, screaming at the son, not the son at the father. What's the big deal if you move his slippers or not? You know, in the Beis HaMikdash, if you move the menorah from one spot to another and you light it, it could be a very severe penalty. Why? Everything has to be in a very specific spot because every detail is connected to something going on in the Mila. And therefore, if you move it out of its place, it's like somebody would say, what's the difference if I put the switch up or I put it down? What's the difference? Put it up a little bit, one inch, or I move it 1 inch, or I bring it down or up. Put it up or down could be the difference whether you'll end up on the moon or the spaceship won't move, or an atomic bomb will be exploded, or who knows what. I mean, it's not a switch. This is connected to a whole spiritual network, and whatever I do will activate that entire spiritual network. And by tzaddikim, that's everything they do is connected to ruchnis and to godliness. So therefore, every nuance of a tzaddik is something spiritual and godly, and that's a different of a merkava. So we have 3 details. One detail is that his devotion to Hashem is every second, never ever any interruption, not even for a moment, which means even when he's sleeping. Like the story of the Baal Shem Tov I just told you, or the story of the Arizal. I'm teaching so many classes, I don't remember what I did tell you, what I didn't tell you. So if I told you, just pick up both hands and I'll stop. But there's a story with the Arizal that he was one. This is not a story from a storybook. This is in the writings of the Arizal. Reb Chaim Vital writes, I saw my Rebbe sleeping. It was a Shabbos afternoon, Parshas Balak, and I saw his lips moving. And when he woke up, I asked him what was going on. And he said that he saw certain inyanim, ruchnisdik things, amazing things. And he said to him, could you share it with me? He was his closest student. He's the one who wrote all the books of the Arizal were written by this student. No one else. The Arizal said, the one you can trust, that whatever he writes as if I wrote this myself is Reb Chaim Vital. So Chassidus basically goes everything by Reb Chaim Vital. So he asked him to share it with him. So he said, if I would share with you what I just saw in these 2 hours, this is his words, it would take me between 60 to 80 years. And this is brought down in many Maimonides of Chassidus, the story. So what's the difference between the Arizal sleeping and we're sleeping? When we go to sleep, it's 8 hours or 7 hours of blank. If you're fortunate not to have nightmares or something, so it's 8 hours of blank. When the Arizal sleeping, what he's accomplishing spiritually would take him 60 to 80 years to give over to an ordinary person. So tzaddikim of this caliber, their sleeping is not their gashmis is totally on a different level. So number one, their devotion to Hashem is every second, which is davening, learning, thought, speech, and action, every nuance. Number two, they're disconnected. They're not involved in gashmis whatsoever. And number three is that they're constantly going not forward, but up, higher and higher. Every moment, they're higher than the moment before. It's inconceivable for our brain to even understand how that's even possible. Maybe a malach you can see it, but humans, we can't understand. And that's why very often these tzaddikim are called malachim. So this is the reason why Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David, Moshe, all the tzaddikim usually chose to be shepherds. To be able to be so devoted, so dedicated, so intensely connected, you have to disconnect from the gashmis, right? How could you be doing all the gashmis the thing like everybody else and be in a city with everything around you? It's going to be so disturbing. Look at ourselves. If you want to concentrate on something and there's people in the other right next to you talking, you already can't concentrate. You have to, close your ears, put in an earplug. You just can't. So usually to concentrate on something, you want to be quiet. You want it to be quiet. Sometimes people the big thinkers used to go out into the woods, in a cave where it's totally quiet. So they were shepherds. Shepherd is a very quiet place. You're not in the city, you're outside of the city. The sheep don't bother you. You see trees, nature, amachaya. You can focus on Hashem. That's them. What about Yosef? Where was he? First of all, he was never a shepherd. Second of all, he was in the other end of the spectrum. Not only he wasn't a shepherd, which is isolated from the rest of the world, he was in the place of the world, which was the lowest of the lowest of that generation in Mitzrayim, Eretz Haaretz. Number one. Number two, if he was in Mitzrayim, in a basement somewhere, no, but he's in Mitzrayim, but he's in a basement. He's protecting himself. He wasn't in a basement. Where did he live? In the palace. He was with the king. Okay, if you're living in the palace and you find a little corner of the palace to hide, no, you can meditate and connect. But he wasn't hiding. What was he doing? What was his job? What was his job description? It says he was running the whole country. In Chumash it says that without him, nobody lifted a hand or a foot in the entire Mitzrayim. He took care of everything going on in Egypt. He was in charge. And it says in Chumash that he went to the house to do his work. So the Gemara says, what was in his work? He did all the accounting and all the bookkeeping of everything going on in Mitzrayim. How is it possible that a person should be in Mitzrayim, a person should be invested in whatever is going on in Egypt, doing all, like you said, the accounting and this and that, and running the country and giving it okay for this and not giving it okay for that, running a country like a mayor of a city or a governor of a state or a president of a country, and at the same time have the same kind of devotion and dedication to Hashem, exactly like those tzaddikim that are isolated and they are shepherds. So the brothers had no concept that such a thing is even possible. Wow. And therefore there's no way they thought this person could be a tzaddik like Yosef. You have an idea?
It's like,
a little bit?
Where your head is, in a way. Like in life, you could be a monk, but if your head is somewhere else, then you're not really there, no?
Right, but we're talking about even people that are tzaddikim, and the answer is that actually Yosef's tzaddik source, the way it's explained in Chassidus, he had a neshama that came from even a higher source than even the others, and therefore he was able to do these to such an extent. And that's what the Maimon is going to explain. So let's do it inside now. Okay, don't worry. Abraham and Isaac, they're not upset, they're not jealous, they'll be okay.
What about the Rebbeim?
We'll soon get there. Let's first do what it says. It's known the difference between Yosef and the shvat. Shabbat Yosef, in reference to Yosef, it says, He came to the house to do his work. So the Gemara says, what is his work? It's not Gemara, I guess it's brought down from the Targum. The Targum Unkelis on the Pasuk says, he came to the house to do his work, Lemivdag b'kizvei chushbinei, to look over the books with all the accounting. Accounting of what? Not a little grocery store on the corner. Accounting of all of Mitzrayim. That was his first job. Then he was promoted and he became the second in command to Pari. Without you, without him, Pari said, no one will be able to lift a hand or a foot in the entire country, which means everything that's going to go on in the country has to have his approval, has to have his overseeing it, that it's done right. Nevertheless, he stood in his place in terms of serving Hashem, and he was on the same level, just like his neshama was when it was in Atzilus. That's Yosef. But by the Shvatim it says, they did not recognize him, which means the way the Shvatim served Hashem, like it says in Chumash, that they told Pari that we are shepherds, that's our occupation. Why were they shepherds? A shepherd could isolate himself outside of the city, so all the inyanim that are going on in the city, shouldn't disturb them from serving Hashem. That's what it means they didn't recognize. They had no recognition that there could be such a kind of an avodah, they could not even fathom such a thing. To be in such a place. Everything Mitzrayim is happening through Yosef. And what's Mitzrayim? It's the most immoral, impure place in the whole world. And at the same time, while he's dealing with all this garbage, he was serving Hashem like in the world of Atzilus. Total dveikus, total unity, and total devotion to Hashem himself. So how was he really capable of doing it? And how was he different than the brothers? So it has to do with the source of his neshama. The source of the neshama of the Shvatim was from the world of Bria. But the source of Yosef's neshama was from the world of Atzilus. Being that the world of Atzilus is a higher world, therefore he was able to live on that level. The neshamas of the Shvatim was from a lower world, so they were able to maintain that level of Merkava by being isolated from the Gashmistic world. But they couldn't be in the world and at the same time maintain such a level of dveikus. In the Chumash, it says, when the brothers were saying how terrible they feel, that they sold him and everything they did to him, and Yosef said that this is Hashem's plan. But the term he used was, Hasachas Elikim Ani, I'm not Hashem. Hashem is the one that made this happen. So the deeper meaning to those words are, Ani L'maylu B'chin Hashem Elikim. When he said, I'm not Elokim, he meant to say, my source of my neshama is not from the name Elokim, which is more limited, but his neshama comes from a higher source, which is Malchus Datzilus. Hambokar Ha'olamis, the Olam Bria Yitzira V'Asiyah. Lo Tach Hashem Elokim K'mei Atam. You're on a lower level, you come from the name Elokim, and that's why you will not be able to even comprehend how it's possible to be in a place like Mitzrayim and maintain the same level of dveikus like in like when they live by Yaakov, or like in the world of Atzilus. But because my neshama comes from a higher level, I'm able to do that. Because he was from Atzilus, so everything about the worldly things did not confuse him. Klal, Adma Marash, the way it's explained by the Rebbe Marash. So basically, it means that when he was standing in front of Paroi and talking to Paroi, the way you have to talk to Paroi, and relating to Paro's thoughts and Paro's response and so on and so forth, at the same time, he saw all the spiritual and godly things that are going on. That's the source of Paroi and the source of what's happening, and he was relating to that at the same time, which is something which we see a little, we're davening, and a little something is going on, we're already disturbing. So I just want to say that, of course, the Rebbe is talking about great tzaddikim here, but probably we can learn from this on our level that when a person davens, when a person learns, they should be totally invested in what they're doing, and that things around us shouldn't be disturbing us, they shouldn't be getting in the way from my concentration on my davening and my learning. Of course, that's easy to do if I isolate myself, but we're not isolated, we do live around other people. And one of the things that are probably the biggest thing responsible for people not concentrating today are the phones, yeah. Which means we have this access every second to look at what's going on, what's happening, who's calling me, did I get a message from this one, that one? Even if you're not looking at the phone, just the idea that nobody's really present wherever they are. Everybody's all over the world. Mamish, all over the place. Especially now with Israel, I want to know the news in Israel. I want to know what's with my friend here, my cousin there, my mother, my father here, this. But first of all, people actually do look. And second of all, even if I don't, just the fact that I'm thinking of later, I'll take a look and I'll see, which means we're spread out all over the place. And of course, what are we supposed to do? The only thing we can do is that at the moment that I am learning or davening, to try to just lock myself in and lock out everything else as if it doesn't exist. Like it says in Shulchan Aruch in reference to Shabbos. Everyone knows that Shabbos is not allowed to do any work. It's more than that. It says, Kol malachto chasuya. On Shabbos, we have to feel like a person who just retired from all his work. In other words, okay, I don't work today, but when I go back to work on Monday, I have to take care of this, I have to take care of that, I have to call this one, I have to sell that. But a person who retired has nothing to think about anymore. It's over. And that's what it says. In other words, it's a state of mind. It's not just practically, technically not working. I have to put myself in a state of mind as if it doesn't exist. I remember once there was a Farbrengen. It was a very unusual thing. I was there, where there were guests here from Israel. This is years back in the 1960s, guests from Israel. And, it was after Yom Tov. They're playing, they had to catch their plane. All of a sudden, news. Rebbe's Farbrengen. They're supposed to go catch the plane soon. So I guess they'll go to Farbrengen. Like this, they'll have to go to the airport. Mamish the last minute. The Rebbe sits down at Farbrengen and says, I know there are people that have to catch a plane, but right now is a Farbrengen. And when the Farbrengen, forget about the plane. There is no plane. In fact, it says in Chassidus that Hashem creates the world every second. So the plane hasn't even been created yet. It'll be created when you need to go. And right now you're here completely. I don't know how many people succeeded in doing that, but I'm sure everybody tried, with all their heart and soul to rock out. Everyone knows what it's like the last minutes before you go on a flight. I have to get this, I have to pick up that, I have to close the suitcase, and I have to remember something which I forgot to put in, and all these things on your head, and forget about it. You're curious to know the end of the story was there was a big delay, and the plane went about 3 hours later. Everybody was on time. Nobody missed the plane.
They were
so crazy, I'm sorry.
Right, but I guess that's the level that we can relate to, that at least on our level, not to let the things from the outside disturb us. And of course, knowing these tzaddikim and their avodah gives us the strength to do our avodah. But this, the Rebbe says, is a reflection of what we said before, that Or Ein Sof could be in the lowest of lowest things, and yet it doesn't have any effect. So that's about Ur Sof. And this is a tzaddik who's connected to Ur Sof can do exactly the same thing. To be continued.
What happened with the plane? How'd that happen? The Rebbe made it happen like that?
I would think so, yeah.
That's so amazing.
The pilot fell asleep. He put his alarm clock on snooze and it didn't work the second time. Yeah.
Is that the mistake the brothers made when they stood, that they didn't recognize him then?
Yeah.
They thought he was evil.
Obviously they misunderstood. It's a little bit like other tzaddikim, the Rambam, because his greatness was in a totally different level, way beyond the caliber of the others, people didn't understand. Arizal had that, the Baal Shem Tov had that, and so on.
People think that they're evil.
Right, they misunderstood, yeah.
Right. Was that what Demo saw that made him like prefer him over the others?
Made him what?
They prefer him over the others.
Right, he saw that he was really not having any brothers. He saw his greatness.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did Yaakov see it?
He had Ruach HaKodesh, I guess.
How did Yosef